The lie that split my family and the truth that set me free. It was a Thursday in late October, one of those gray days that makes the classroom lights feel harsher and the walk home feel longer. Ninth grade had become predictable by then. I was 15, caught somewhere between wanting to stay invisible and craving just enough attention to feel like I mattered. The bell rang and kids spilled out into the hallways like always. I grabbed my stuff and met up with a couple of friends near the school gate. Rain was in the air, thick, heavy, the kind that makes your skin prickle. I had one of those compact umbrellas tucked into my backpack, and I pulled it out, half opening it just to fidget with something while we waited. It was black with a soft, rounded rubber tip. I started spinning it lightly between my fingers as we joked about a quiz earlier that day. We were standing near the front steps, and that's when I spotted Tom. My cousin. We shared a family tree and not much else. He was more of a background character in my life, quiet, intense, always hovering near the edge of every conversation. We went to the same school, and coincidentally, the same after-school study center. I didn't dislike him. We just didn't click. That afternoon, he was leaning against a pillar talking with two kids from his class. He was wearing his usual too-tight uniform and his glasses, always slightly crooked on his face. For some reason, maybe because I was in a dumb, restless mood, I walked past him and gave the top of his head a light tap with the umbrella. "Lighten up, man," I said casually, half laughing. The rubber tip made a soft thunk against the metal frame of his glasses. It didn't knock them off. It didn't hurt. He flinched a little, but not like someone who had just been hit. More like someone surprised. I remember a girl in his group giggling awkwardly. Tom looked at me slowly. Not angry. Not even annoyed. Just blank. Like a screen that hadn't loaded yet. I shrugged, offered a grin, and walked back to my friends. One of them raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Too stiff, I joked, and we moved on to some stupid conversation about who had the worst math teacher. I didn't see Tom walk away. Didn't notice how stiffly he moved. Didn't catch whatever flickered in his eyes when he turned. And why would I? It was nothing. A harmless poke with a rubber-tipped umbrella. Or so I thought. But that one split-second joke, that nothing moment, would flip my entire world upside down. Because Tom had decided it wasn't nothing. And by that night, everyone else would believe him. It started with a knock on my bedroom door. I was lying on my bed, earbuds in, zoning out to a playlist that had no business calming me as much as it did. My mom opened the door without waiting for a response, classic mom move, and the look on her face immediately pulled me back into reality. "Can we talk?" she said. Her tone wasn't angry. But it wasn't neutral, either. She had her arms crossed over her chest, a printed message from her phone in one hand. That was never good. "Sure," I said, sitting up. My heart ticked up a notch. She walked in and closed the door behind her. "Tom's mom called me just now." I blinked. "Okay?" "She says you hit Tom today. That you hurt him. That you've been bullying him. Not just today, at school, and even at the study center." I laughed before I could stop myself. "What? No. Mom, that's not what happened." My mom didn't look convinced at first, but she didn't look fully sold on Tom's version either. That gave me hope. "I tapped him on the head with my umbrella," I said quickly. "It was stupid, yeah, but it wasn't hard. It didn't hurt him. It hit the edge of his glasses, and that was it. I even joked with him. It wasn't violent. It wasn't serious." Her expression softened a little. "Did anyone else see it?" "Yeah. There were other kids around. I don't think any of them thought it was a big deal." She looked down at her phone, lips pursed. Tom's mom was furious. She said he came home crying. That he was shaking. Said he was afraid to go back to school. "That's ridiculous," I snapped. "He didn't even react when it happened. He just walked away. No one was crying. No one was scared." I could feel my chest tightening. Not just from anger, but from something deeper. Confusion. Hurt. Why would he lie like that? We weren't even that close, there was no grudge. No fight. Nothing that made sense. "He said I've been bullying him," I repeated, quieter this time. "Why would he say that?" My mom sighed and sat down beside me. "I don't know. But I believe you." Those 4 words were like a lifeline thrown to someone drowning. I nodded, trying not to let the relief show too much. "But this isn't going to stop here," she added. "His mom said she's going to the school. Wants you punished." Punished? For something I didn't do. It didn't hit me fully until the next day. I walked into school and immediately noticed the shift. People were whispering. Not loudly, but enough. A few glanced at me and looked away quickly. Others stared a bit too long. I found out during second period, Tom had filed a complaint with the administration. I was officially being accused of harassment. It felt surreal. Like a prank that hadn't found its punchline yet. I was called to the office just after lunch. The secretary avoided eye contact as she told me to take a seat outside the principal's office. I sat there, heart pounding, replaying everything in my head over and over. I kept coming back to that stupid moment with the umbrella. Could something so small really spiral into this? The door opened and the principal waved me in. She was a strict woman, sharp eyes, short gray bob, and a reputation for not tolerating nonsense. I'd only ever spoken to her during school events, never like this. "Sit down," she said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. Tom was already seated, looking miserable. The next 10 minutes were a blur of accusations. Tom said I'd been targeting him for weeks. That I mocked him in class. That I shoved him in the hallway. That I'd been aggressive at the study center. He described it like a pattern of behavior, not a single incident. I stared at him, dumbfounded. "That's not true," I said. "None of that happened. He's making it up." "Were there any witnesses?" the principal asked, flipping through a printed complaint. I don't know. There were kids around yesterday. They saw what really happened. That it wasn't violent." She nodded slowly. "We'll need to investigate further." The meeting ended with no resolution. I wasn't suspended, but the investigation was open. My parents would be contacted again. I walked out of that office with my stomach in knots. Later that afternoon, I sat alone on a bench behind the cafeteria when someone approached. It was a guy from my biology class, David, I think. He stood awkwardly for a second, then said, "Hey. I saw what happened with Tom. It wasn't a big deal." I blinked. "You did?" "Yeah. I was right there." He didn't say anything. Just walked away. "You didn't hit him hard." "It was like nothing." "Would you tell that to the school?" He shrugged. "Sure. If they ask." That moment felt like the only bit of sunlight in a sky that had gone completely gray. But even with the truth on my side, I could feel it, the weight of something shifting in my world. This wasn't just about a misunderstanding anymore. It was about trust. About perception. About how fast people can turn when they want to believe the worst. And my cousin had just drawn the battle lines. The next morning, I walked into school with a pit in my stomach. The hallway noise sounded distant, like I was underwater. Every glance felt sharper, every whisper louder. It wasn't paranoia, people were talking. And I knew exactly what about. In second period, my name was called over the intercom. I was to report to the principal's office immediately. I stood up, trying to ignore the stares from my classmates. The walk down the hallway felt like a tunnel. Cold. Isolated. By the time I reached the office, I was sweating. The secretary gave me a tight-lipped smile and pointed to a chair. "Wait here." I sat down and stared at the floor tiles, counting the cracks. The wait felt like hours, though it couldn't have been more than 10 minutes. Finally, the door opened. "Come in," the principal said. Her voice was neutral, unreadable. Tom was already inside, sitting stiffly in a chair across from her desk. "Take a seat," she said. I did. My palms were clammy against my thighs. Tom didn't look at me. "I've reviewed the complaint filed by Thomas," the principal began. "He has alleged that you have been bullying him consistently over the past several weeks, both on school grounds and at the study center. He claims yesterday's incident was only the most recent in a series of events." I stared at her, stunned. "That's not true. That's not what happened." Tom finally looked at me, his expression calculated. "You've always picked on me," he said. "People just didn't notice until now." "I don't even talk to you outside of family stuff," I said, trying not to raise my voice. "And what happened yesterday wasn't even close to bullying. It was a dumb joke with an umbrella. I didn't hurt you." "You hit me hard enough to rattle my glasses," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "And you always make me feel like I'm less than you." The principal interjected. "We are not here to debate feelings. We're here to determine what happened." She turned to me. "Do you have any witnesses who can confirm your version of the story?" I hesitated. There were kids around. I didn't think to ask their names. But one of them, David, I think, he was there. He saw it. "We'll follow up with him," she said, making a note. The meeting dragged on for another 15 minutes. She asked us both to recount everything in detail. Tom stayed consistent in his story, even embellishing things that hadn't happened, claims that I had shoved him, mocked his clothes, made him feel unsafe. It felt like I was watching someone build a house out of matchsticks, fragile, but convincing from a distance. By the time I was dismissed, I felt hollow. I hadn't been suspended, but I'd been warned. An investigation was underway. My parents would be contacted again. I walked out into the hallway, trying to keep my head up. But it felt like every step I took was heavier than the last. At lunch, I sat alone. None of my usual friends joined me. I wasn't sure if they believed the rumors or were just too uncomfortable to ask. Either way, the silence was worse than confrontation. After school, I waited outside the building for a while, just staring at the parking lot. That's when David approached. "Hey," he said. I looked up, surprised. "I told the office what I saw," he said. "That it wasn't violent. That you barely touched him." "Thanks," I said. It was the only word I could manage. He hesitated. People believe what they want to believe. But I know what I saw. I nodded, grateful beyond words. Later that evening, my mom came into my room with an update. The principal had called. They'd interviewed David and 2 other students. So far, the school wasn't taking disciplinary action, but the case wasn't closed. Tom's mother had also contacted the study center. She wanted me banned. "She's trying to cut you off from everything," my mom said, shaking her head. "This isn't just about school anymore." I lay in bed that night staring at the ceiling. I kept replaying Tom's face, calm, collected, like someone who had rehearsed every line. I couldn't understand it. Why lie? What did he gain from this? But understanding didn't matter anymore. What mattered was how fast the world around me was shifting. And how little control I had over it. The following week felt like I was living in someone else's skin. Everything had changed, and yet everything looked the same. The school bell still rang on time. Teachers still droned on about equations and sentence structures. But I had become a ghost in my own life. Even though the school hadn't formally punished me, the social consequences were brutal. I noticed people keeping their distance. Some of the guys I usually talked to during gym acted like I wasn't even in the room. It wasn't outright cruelty, it was worse. It was erasure. My phone buzzed less and less. Group chats got quieter. Or maybe I was just slowly being removed from them. One evening, I noticed a birthday party invite I hadn't received. It stung. Not because I cared about the party, but because I used to be part of that world. At the study center, the tension was worse. Tom had clearly gotten to everyone. A few of the regulars, kids I'd helped with homework, people I'd shared snacks with, now avoided eye contact. I overheard 2 girls whispering about me once. "That's him. That's the cousin who hurt Tom." I wanted to scream. To shake them and say, "That's not what happened. You don't even know me." But I didn't. I just sat through sessions in silence, finishing assignments, keeping my head down. My mom tried to help, but I could tell the stress was getting to her. She had enough on her plate already. Every call from Tom's mother only added more fuel to the fire. She accused me of being manipulative, dangerous, even sociopathic. She wanted me banned from the study center permanently. She wanted a written apology. She wanted me punished. "She's relentless," my mom said one night, rubbing her temples. "She wants to make an example of you." "Why?" I asked. "Why would Tom do this? What did I ever do to him?" She looked at me, and for a moment, I thought she might have an answer. But then she just said quietly, "Some people twist pain into power. Maybe he wants attention. Maybe he's jealous. I don't know. But none of this is your fault." Despite the principal's ongoing investigation, nothing moved fast enough to clear my name. A part of me had hoped that once David gave his statement, everything would be okay. But it wasn't. Tom's story kept evolving. He said I followed him home once, never happened. He claimed I'd made threats at the study center, also untrue. Every time I thought we'd hit the bottom of the accusations, he dug deeper. One day, I got called into the school counselor's office. She asked how I was feeling, how I was coping. I told her the truth, like I'm stuck in a nightmare where no one listens. She nodded, scribbling notes. "Would you be open to mediation with Tom?" Mediation? With someone who built a lie so believable it cracked my world open? I wanted to say no. But I also wanted closure. I wanted to look him in the eye and ask him why. So I said yes. The meeting was scheduled for the following week. I spent every night leading up to it imagining how it would go, how I'd speak calmly, how he'd finally crack, how someone would finally believe me without hesitation. But real life doesn't work like that. When the day came, I sat in a small room with the counselor beside me. Tom walked in, expression unreadable as always. He sat across from me, arms crossed. The counselor explained the rules. No yelling. No interrupting. This is a space to speak honestly and respectfully. She turned to Tom. Would you like to start? He cleared his throat. I just wanted you to stop making me feel small. What? I asked. Tom, I never. The counselor held up a hand. Let him finish. I know you didn't mean to, maybe, Tom said. But every time you joked around me, or teased me at family things, or showed off at school, it made me feel like nothing. Like I was always just your weird cousin. And that umbrella thing, he paused. It was the last straw. It made me feel like a joke. I sat there, stunned. You could have just told me that. You didn't have to lie. You didn't have to destroy everything. I didn't lie, he said sharply. I told the truth the way I felt it. That sentence hit me like a punch. I realized, in that moment, that this wasn't about facts to him. It was about feelings. About perception. And in his world, those feelings were enough to turn me into a villain. The counselor nodded slowly. It's clear you both experienced this differently. That was it. No resolution. No apology. No truth set free. When I left that room, I knew things would never go back to how they were. Tom wasn't going to recant. And the people who had chosen to believe him? Most of them weren't coming back. Weeks passed. The school's investigation quietly wrapped up, and the final verdict was vague and disappointing. There wasn't enough evidence to punish me, but there also wasn't an effort to clear my name. No apology. No formal announcement. Just silence. The kind of silence that says, we won't punish you, but we also won't protect you. I didn't expect a parade, but some kind of acknowledgement would have mattered. Instead, I had to learn to live in the aftermath. The social fracture wasn't healed. Tom still walked the halls like nothing had happened. He smiled more, actually, like some weight had been lifted off him. Meanwhile, I felt like I was still carrying bricks on my back. At the study center, the director finally pulled me aside. She had heard about the mediation, had seen the school's non-action, and decided she couldn't take sides, but she did ask me to sit in the back for a while. Just until things calmed down, she said. That hurt more than I expected. Not being banned, but being shelved. My world got smaller, but clearer. David stuck by me. A couple of quiet classmates started nodding at me again. One even came up after math class and whispered, sorry I didn't say anything before. I didn't believe it, I just didn't know what to do. It wasn't much. But it helped. My mom noticed the difference in me. You were quieter lately, she said one night over dinner. I nodded. I feel like a different person. Like someone who's lived through a storm everyone pretended wasn't real. She reached over and squeezed my hand. You are stronger now. I know it doesn't seem fair, but you've seen something most people don't at your age, how messy people can be. How complicated the truth is. There was one moment, brief, forgettable to anyone else, that shifted something inside me. It happened one afternoon at the school library. I was reading in the corner when Tom walked in. He saw me, froze, then kept walking to the opposite end. For the first time, he looked uneasy around me. I didn't hate him in that moment. I didn't even want revenge. I just felt done. Done trying to convince people of something they weren't ready to believe. Done needing justice from people who weren't equipped to give it. The weekend after, I went out with David. We grabbed burgers and played video games at his house like nothing had changed. At one point, he paused the game and looked at me seriously. You know, he said, I think what Tom did sucked. But what sucks more is how fast people believed him. You didn't deserve that. Yeah, I said. But maybe that's how you figure out who's real. He nodded. Exactly. That night, I didn't feel like a ghost. I felt like a kid again. A kid who'd been through something ugly, but who was still here. Still standing. I started focusing on what I could control. My grades. My routines. My future. I signed up for a school project with a group I didn't know well. They didn't care about the drama. They just wanted to get the work done. That felt like a win. At home, things started feeling lighter. My mom laughed more. We talked about other stuff. Plans. College. Dreams. And Tom? He faded from my thoughts. Not as a forgiven figure, but as one I no longer needed to carry. In the end, I didn't get justice. Not in the storybook way. But I got something else, something better. Clarity. But I also knew this, I hadn't lost everything. I still had my mom. I still had David. And maybe, with time, I'd have the strength to rebuild the rest. Time has a strange way of softening the sharpest edges. Months passed, and though the scars from that ordeal didn't disappear, they slowly stopped throbbing. They became reminders instead, quiet, steady symbols of everything I'd endured and everything I'd survived. Tom's name barely came up anymore. People moved on, as they always do. New rumors replaced old ones, and the school found fresher drama to feed on. I never spoke to him again, but I didn't need to. Some distances are meant to stay permanent. And that was okay. David and I remained close. He became the kind of friend who saw beyond the surface, who understood what it meant to feel isolated, to be misjudged. We didn't dwell on the past much anymore. There wasn't a need. Our friendship became about the present, movies, late-night gaming, helping each other through pre-exam stress. My confidence, once cracked, began to rebuild itself in layers. Quietly. Gradually. I joined a student committee focused on mental health awareness. It felt right, like using my experience to help others who might one day feel as lost as I did. We created posters, hosted discussions, even brought in speakers. It wasn't about telling my story, but about giving others space to tell theirs. Senior year rolled around quicker than I expected. College application season hit like a whirlwind. I poured myself into essays and study nights, working harder than I ever had, not just for the grades, but to prove something to myself. That I wasn't defined by what someone said about me in ninth grade. That I was more than a rumor, more than a lie. One spring afternoon, I received my first acceptance letter. I read it 3 times before it sank in. My mom hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. She didn't say anything at first, just smiled through teary eyes. "You earned this," she finally whispered. Later that night, I stood in my room holding the letter and thought back to everything I'd lost. Family ties that had once felt unbreakable were still fractured. Some relationships never recovered. But instead of grieving them, I chose gratitude. Gratitude for the ones who stayed. For the ones who showed up when it mattered most. The day before graduation, we had a senior reflection event. Students shared memories, advice, even regrets. I didn't plan to speak. But when the microphone was offered to anyone who wanted to say something, I stood up. "My name's Eli," I began, heart pounding. "And if there's one thing I've learned, it's this: not everyone who smiles at you is a friend, and not everyone who stays silent is your enemy. People are complicated. But no matter what happens, the truth, your truth, matters. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is keep standing." There was a pause. Then, applause. Not loud, not explosive, but warm. Real. That was the moment I knew I had found peace. Not the kind that erases the past, but the kind that makes room for the future. I don't think I'll ever forget what happened. But I'm no longer haunted by it. I'm moving forward. And that's enough.